give you a brief overview of United Church Funds for those of you who may not be familiar with who we are and what we do. United Church Funds, sometimes known as the acronym UCF, has been around for a little over 100 years. We're based in New York City. Like Church Building and Loan, like the Insurance Board, and like Cornerstone, we are a financial ministry of the United Church of Christ, and we are the leading provider of investment management services to UCC churches and ministries across the United States. And we also have clients that are from other denominations as well. We currently offer in our family of funds 13 investment options that span the risk spectrum of risk and return. We have over $800 million in assets under management, and we have over 1,000 clients. And those clients include UCC conferences, churches, ministries such as Back Bay Mission, and other organizations. We're focusing and talking about planned giving today because, as you've heard earlier, churches have stewardship campaigns, they have capital campaigns, they have annual campaigns, but often don't focus on what happens for a member of that congregation to make a gift that'll be lasting and goes beyond what he or she puts in the pew every Sunday. I also want to draw your attention to the fact that of that over $800 million we manage, that's primarily large endowments and long-term savings plans for these churches and ministries. But many of those endowments started with a gift. It may have been a planned gift, it may have been a gift for cash, it may have been a gift of stock or bonds, mutual fund, could have been left in a will. But that endowment, many of which are in the millions of dollars today, started with one gift and may have been a small gift, but over time grew into what they are today. So for the next hour, we'll be talking about planned giving from a couple of different aspects. Save your questions. This man is a professor of planned giving, but I'm not. So if you have questions during our session, please feel free to ask. We do want to be mindful of our time. We have a little, almost an hour, but we think it's going to be time well spent, and we think this will be information that you can take back to your respective churches as well. So without further ado, I'll pass the baton.
One part of the planned giving program, which was marketing to churches, helping churches build capacity, and working with people who had decided they wanted to make planned gifts. The second part of the planned giving program is the investment management part, which United Church Funds had always done. And then the third piece was the legal counsel part of it, and that remains with a law firm in Boston. So about 3 years ago, United Church Funds decided, or the United Church of Christ decided that United Church Funds would do all of the planned giving program. And they asked me, I had left by that point, they asked me if I would continue on as a consultant. So I've been functioning as an independent consultant for the past few years, and it's really been a pleasure to see this program grow under Howard's leadership. When you leave a place, you always want it to get better because you invest so much time in it, and that's what has happened. What I want to do today is, number one, spend just a little bit of time doing the definitional thing, talking about what we mean when we say planned giving, and spending just a few minutes on what the vehicles are and how United Church Funds can help you do those vehicles. Then I want to talk about what some of the challenges are in doing a planned giving program for these times, and then give my view, at least, on how we can structure our programs for sustainability and to meet those challenges. Does that work for everyone here? I don't know why planned giving is always after lunch. So if you feel yourself nodding off just a little bit, just do your ear like that and I'll talk a little louder or something like that. How's that? So let me turn this on. When we talk about planned giving, we in our context, we talk about any gift that's made in the context of an overall financial or estate plan, and one that's done from assets rather than income generally. So that can be you write out a check, it can be from a will, it can be done in lots of different ways. And the presumption there is that when people give from their assets, their expectation is that we won't spend it all tomorrow. But since they have accumulated those assets over the course of their lives, the institution will use them for long-term support. So that's the broadest category of gifts that we're talking about. One subset of those gifts are deferred gifts. And those gifts are gifts where you make the commitment now, but the full value of that gift is realized at some point in the future. So Howard Hawkins decides he's going to leave $5 million to the Rocky Mountain Conference in his will. Our hope is that Howard will be here for a long time, and so we won't see that money for a while. But making that commitment is important, and as we'll see as we talk about sustaining a program, taking steps to make sure that Howard continues that commitment is an important thing for us to do. Then the final type of gifts that we're going to talk about just very briefly are life income gifts. And those are gifts where there's an irrevocable transfer of an asset. You can't really take the money back without there being some pretty significant penalty. You can undo it, but it's not pretty. And in return for that, you get some financial consideration. And then when you die, what remains of that gift and how it's been invested goes to a charity of your choice. You've probably heard about charitable gift annuities. We'll talk about those as sort of the best example of that type of gift. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about planned gifts. And this is my thing, and I don't know which way it goes either. So deferred gifts. You're familiar with lots of these, gifts made through a will or a trust. Life insurance is an often unrecognized possible charitable asset. There are various ways you can do that. You can give a policy, you can create a policy. There are tax implications, tax advantages to doing that, which we can talk about at some other point. Retirement assets are another good possibility for using for charitable purposes. You probably know, for example, that if you're 70 and a half or older, not very many people in this room, and you have an IRA, you can designate up to $100,000 in a year to a charity of your choice, with that counting towards your minimum distribution and not counting towards your income. So there are vehicles like that that you can use with your retirement assets that are really quite something. Retirement assets are also, not to go on a tangent too much, but retirement assets are also sort of an interesting class of assets for us to have, because there's a possibility of double taxation. If you were to leave a retirement asset to someone in your family, that family member faces the prospect of paying the income taxes that you would have paid on that asset had you received it. So if you have a lot of different assets, retirement assets might be one of the ones you might want to use for charity. I'm going to stop here and say, one of the things that we always say when we talk to people about plan giving programs is to encourage anyone considering a gift to have independent financial and estate planning advice. We're in the business of raising money for the places that are important to us. And so we have a built-in conflict of interest. We need to encourage that independent financial and estate planning advice, so that Mrs. Jones, in her zeal for the church, doesn't end up giving us money that she can't afford to give to us. So those are deferred gifts. Life income gifts, we talked about charitable gift annuities. Let me give you the cartoon version. Howard, I'm going to pick on Howard. Howard has a, yeah, that's right. Of that $5 million, Howard carves out $100,000 and designates that as a charitable gift annuity to benefit the Rocky Mountain Conference. He does that through United Church Funds. United Church Funds takes that $100,000, it puts $50,000 in this hand and $50,000 in this hand and invests them both. Out of this hand, Howard gets income based on his age. This hand is held in trust for the institution. So that if Howard dies on time, and the funds have been at his life expectancy, and the, I have to clarify what on time means in this context, right? So if Howard dies on time, there's nothing left in this hand, and this hand has at least half of what his original gift was. So for people who have assets, but they need income from those assets, it's a way to make a significant gift, but continue to use that asset for their own personal things. Yes? Is it income, or are you pulling principal? Yes. The way annuities work is that you receive back in income not only what that asset gets through investment, but also that original principal. And so that means, for example, that in your taxation, you don't have to pay taxes on that original principal that you get back. So there are also tax advantages to doing that as well. Does that work? Okay. All right, let's see where we were. Good question. Now, a charitable gift annuity works because it's a pooled fund. So you have a large group of people, some of whom are going to die early, some of whom are going to die late, given my definition. And it all balances out in the end, so the pool can have financial integrity. And it's based on the actuarial tables that have to do with life expectancy. A charitable remainder trust is not a pooled fund. So Howard decides that in addition to his $100,000 charitable gift annuity, he's going to do a $200,000 charitable remainder trust. You're getting lots of money today. I know. This is awful. So United Trust Funds takes that $200,000 and invests it in a fund. It agrees with Howard what the payout is going to be. So it's probably going to be 5 or 6%. And then Howard gets that income in one or two ways. I'll explain that in just a second. And then when Howard dies, what's left in that fund goes to the charity of his choice. Now, if, let's say Howard wants to do 9%, and United Church Funds agrees, he can run out of money. The trust can run out of money, and there can be nothing left for the charity. Now, there are some ways, tax-wise, that it has to be structured to minimize that possibility happening, but it is a possibility. With a charitable gift annuity, you're going to get that income because the regulations say even if the charitable gift annuity fund runs out of money, United Church Funds has to come up with those payments to the annuitants. So that's one of the major differences between those two things. Charitable remainder trusts come in two different types. Annuity trust, Howard gives that $200,000, agrees on 5%. You apply the 5% to the $200,000. Howard gets that amount for the term of the trust or until he dies. On a unitrust, forgot what it was called. A unitrust, Howard gives that $200,000 at 5%. Year one, he gets 5% of $200,000. Year two, you determine the fair market value of what's in the trust, and you apply the 5% to that. So year two, United Church Funds has done an incredible job. It's now worth $400,000. So Howard's going to get 5% of $400,000. So the reverse of that is if it goes down, the payout also goes down. It's a way of calibrating the income so that the charity has a better chance of getting money. But in a growing market, in the 90s and the O's, everyone wanted a unitrust because not only was their income going up every year, but the charity was getting more money as well. So that's how that works. I'm sorry. A lead trust is sort of the inverse of a remainder trust. A donor gives an amount of money. The charity gets the income for some predetermined point of time. And then the original money plus whatever investment gain goes either back to the person or their estate or someone else they designate. And there are various gift tax and income tax deductions that relate to that. Did you have a question or something to add? I know there are members of the endowment committee here, so if you have something you want to add to what I'm saying, don't be shy. Is that a deal? Okay, all right, good. So that's the way that works. Pooled income funds are essentially charitable mutual funds. When you make a gift, you buy a certain number of shares in that fund, and you get income based on the number of shares you have in the fund. Now, the advantage of a pooled income fund is income traditionally understood. So it's short-term capital gains and dividends, so you never invade the principal. So someone who wants to give a gift and have that entire gift, at least that entire gift go to charity, can do a pooled income fund. Now, because most companies don't express value through dividends and short-term capital gains these days, if you're looking at which one is going to produce more income for the donor, it's not going to be the pooled income fund. But those are the choices that we don't need to make for people, but that their financial advisors need to help them make. Anything else? All right. This is in your packet, so we won't go over it in detail. This is just an example of what it looks like for someone who might want to make this sort of gift. Let me just point out a couple of things. Can you see it? Okay, well, we won't do that then. Well, I'll talk through it there just very briefly. This is a 65-year-old person who makes a gift of $20,000 based solely on the fact that they're 65. Don't care what their health is, don't care how many kids they have, don't care what their house is worth. They're going to get 5.1% of that. They get a charitable deduction that represents the present value of what's in this hand. Remember the two hands things, okay? So it's going to be a little less than half. They get a standard annuity payment. There's a tax-free portion of the income they received, which represents the principal that's being returned. Otherwise, they pay ordinary income taxes. And then in 2040, there's no tax-free portion anymore. Any guesses about why? Because that's when they're supposed to die, is 2040. So now, if you live beyond your life expectancy, it doesn't mean that your gift annuity ends. It means that we begin to take money out of this hand that we held in trust for the organization. Likewise, if Howard gets hit by a bus when we get back to the 16th Street Mall, then you get the whole $200,000 because he hasn't received any income. I need to stop that because he's giving me a ride back to Denver, so it might not be a pretty car ride. Yeah. So let's talk about what we believe the best steps are for creating this sustainable plan giving program. And there's going to be a point that I get in trouble, and you can see it already. Craft and make the case for support. One of the things that you've heard throughout all of our presentations is articulating a vision and our strategy for getting there. We're asking them to include us in making probably the biggest stewardship decision that they're going to make. And that is, in their estate plan, disposing of all the stuff that they've accumulated over the course of their lives. So I think it's critically important that we articulate a case that's compelling and that people understand and can buy into. We need to choose and equip leaders for this work. I believe that we need to, as we move towards a more healthy environment in the church around money, understand why people are suspicious. And what happens is people in their everyday lives, virtually every decision is based on their financial capacity. Where they live, where their kids go to school, all those things. And they come to church and we tell them that we're not going to judge them on the basis of that. Now, but we don't talk about money. We don't talk about money at all. So why should they believe us? We put them in a situation, no offense to the pastors who are here, with leaders who often have financial issues of their own because we don't pay them enough and because we haven't given them the money to go to seminary. So they see that and they understand that and they say, and how many of the pastors here in their ordination process were asked to prove competency in stewardship and financial issues? So we don't equip our pastors to deal with it. But we expect people in our pews to believe that it's not going to make a difference in how our pastors and how our congregations deal with them, how much or how little money they have. Believe it or not, it's not just how little, it's how much. I have a friend who's a pastor in Florida, Vero Beach. You know Bob Baggett. And he says that, and I don't mean to equate this with people who are poor, but people in his church are afraid. The church is the only place they know that their worth is not determined by how much money they have. And so I encourage us to give a little grace around this issue to people who are resistant, to try to understand it and to look at it holistically and build confidence by talking about money, by treating our pastors well financially, by talking about the elephant in the room. You know, if we don't talk about it, we won't deal with it. So my advice to people who are in various places in terms of the pastor's role in fundraising is to start at that place. If folks don't want the pastor to know, then start by preaching and teaching stewardship, and that's your role. If they don't want you to ask, do other things. Do the cultivation part, do the case development part, do the part that works, and then move towards a more healthy environment where people are more trusting and with reason. So that's my rant about that. Because I do believe pastors should know. Andy gave examples. You know, I have pastors who say that the only way they know that someone's in financial trouble is when they stop paying their pledge. So, you know, there are good reasons for pastors to be involved in this. And frankly, from a fundraising perspective, I'm a member of a church where if you want to get the maximum amount from me, Paul Sadler has to be involved in asking me. Our pastor has to be involved in that conversation. And it needs to be a broader conversation with me about the role of money in my life, what my hopes are for the future of my family and my church, all those things that pastors help us to discern. So I'm going to stop that rant now and get on with this. Expect and model financial commitment. We've talked about that before. You can't expect people to give unless you've made the commitment yourself. That's what we expect of our leaders. One thing I'll say about leaders, though, is many people believe that in order to have a planned giving committee, you need an attorney, an accountant, you know, a financial advisor, all those things. It's nice to have those people. I think the critical people you need are people who are givers and people who can articulate the case and who are unapologetic in asking. Those are the three things that I think are critical for members of your committee. And people who are givers, people who can articulate the case, and people who are unapologetic askers. And you know what I mean by unapologetic. You know. Let's talk about recognition for just a second. That was a point that was brought up earlier today. And I'll say a couple things about that. Number one, people who tell you they don't want to be recognized aren't telling you the truth. What they're saying to you is, I don't want to be embarrassed. I don't want to be recognized in a way that's inconsistent with my place in this community and with my values. So number one, we have to find a way of doing it that is consistent with our values and that builds the community rather than tearing it apart. The second thing I'll say is recognition. The reason people are resistant, in my view and in my experience, to recognition the way we've done it is it's only about money. So that Mrs. Smith, who's volunteered for 1,000 years with the choir, doesn't get a room named after her, but because you inherited $1 million, you get to have a legacy at the church. How's that work? So I think we have to find a way of broadening our recognition programs to include various types of gifts that people give. And I think that will take away a little bit of the sting for people. We did a little campaign for Franklinton Center years ago, and this recognition thing came up because we wanted to name all the rooms. We wanted to get the money to name all the rooms. And so we came up with, yeah, you can give the money to name a room, but it will be the Susan Mitchell room because Susan is a saint of the church, funded by Don Hill. So it's a way of balancing those things. Might not be the best way in your congregation of balancing those things, but it's a way of recognizing both ends of that spectrum. But I think what Andy said earlier is really important. The important part, both in terms of the role of the pastor and in terms of recognition, is having the conversation and deciding for your context what's going to work best. There is not one answer. People are sometimes skittish about doing planned giving because it does, in fact, happen at the intersection of things we don't want to deal with. Death, taxes, those sorts of things. But my experience has been on the estate planning side that once you make your estate plan, there's a sense of relief that that's taken care of. So I think helping people make those decisions and face those decisions is important ministry for us to do. Folks on the endowment committee know that a shocking number of people in our congregations don't have estate plans. It makes me crazy that 40-year-old couple with a couple of kids who don't think they have anything don't make estate plans or financial plans, because we all have something. United Church Funds has a resource for you where you enumerate what your financial assets and resources are. And I've done that, and I work for the church. I don't make a lot of money, but I was surprised at what I have to make decisions about. And I think there are many people in our congregations who are like that too. Yep. There we go. So it'll take just a second, but it'll be here. So let's talk about some of the other things that are necessary, I think, for doing this. Listen to and know your prospects. The shorthand for that is staying in feasibility mode. Those of you who've done capital campaigns know that in advance of doing a campaign, you go through this process of seeing where people are, how they feel about the case, and just being in conversation with them about their relationship to the community. We should not just do that when we're doing a campaign. That should be part of the work that we do as a stewardship committee, as a community. Understand how donors give. And as Susan sort of intimated earlier, make it as easy as possible. In my early days in the national church, we had an individual on the West Coast, you'll like this example, who sent us a check for a substantial check. And we put it in an envelope and send it back to them. Because the way you give to the United Church of Christ is through your local congregation to the conference, and then, now that wouldn't happen today. But it's an example of how we make giving difficult. I'm one of those people too who doesn't carry checks or cash. So, and if you're 30, you don't even know what a check is. So, those of us who don't have ways that people can give electronically, we gotta figure that out. And then make those decisions about recognition. I want to emphasize again that I'm not saying that you need to put up a plaque tomorrow. You need to have the conversation in your congregation, or I would encourage you to have the conversation in your congregation about what recognition means and how to do it with integrity for your setting. Cultivate and educate. Cultivation in a fundraising sense is this. It is articulating a vision for the future that's compelling and aspirational. It's understanding where your people are in terms of their values and their vision for the future, and making those things come together. That's all cultivation is. Now, if cultivation is done right, this might change. It's that feasibility thing. So our job with planned giving is to make, and with fundraising in general, I think, is to make those things happen. Just articulating a compelling and aspirational vision is not enough. You got to understand what people are and bring them to an understanding and an acceptance and excitement about that vision. So let's move on. So what does making the case mean? I said earlier that the centerpiece of this is making the case. Let me tell you what I mean when I say making the case. Is number one, articulating the values that animate and provide the context for our community. Those of you who are old enough to remember Still Speaking, remember Continuing Testament, Extravagant Welcome, and Changing Lives. Those were not things that we pulled out of air. It was things that were organic to who we were, but it provided a context for us to talk to people about the work of the United Church of Christ, other than in 1957, which is how we started most conversations about that. So now we have different ways of talking about it, but is the way that we did it then. There's a second set of values. I'm involved with Pacific School of Religion, and we're going through this process of visioning. There's a second level of values that we need to articulate. Those are missional values. There are operational values that we also need to articulate. For PSR, Pacific School of Religion, how many PSR graduates? Any? No? What's going on here? No PSR graduates? No, I'm just kidding. At PSR, our operational values are student success, financial sustainability, strength through diversity, and excellence in leadership. Now, and so everything we do, if it doesn't fit into one of those somehow, we don't do. One of the things that we talked about earlier was implementation. It's really important that we align our governance structures to our operational values. And so at PSR, our board agenda are those 4 things. And people, when they get their performance reviews, are part of their performance review is how they have, for PSR and the PSR community, promoted those values. So values are important. Vision. At PSR, and I'll use that as an example, not that it's the only example, what we have said to our committees who are looking in these 4 operational areas for success is, define success if money, other resources, and time were no object. You can always pull it back. You can always let reality intrude upon what your plan is, but it's much harder to push it out. And I think it's especially important in plan giving to articulate this in a way that is almost outrageously aspirational. Because again, we're asking people to look 20, 30 years in the future and to base their decision on the values that we hold and what we believe success looks like. And if we can't do that, I think it's more and more difficult these days to engage people around making those types of gifts. You might get $1,000 because they love the flowers up front or whatever it is. But the really big gifts, whether that be a big gift from that school teacher who leaves you her house or something else, is because we inspire people with these things. Now, in terms of the rest of this, for plan giving, they're illustrative. Because again, things are going to change over the period of time that we're talking about. Outcomes, the I word that Andy talks about. What's the impact that happens? Strategy, how do we make it happen? People don't want to just trust us. They want to know we have a plan. Testimonials, we used to call it witnessing back where I'm from. But, and then the ask, unapologetic and tailored. So this is what I think we need to be about as we do our plan giving and as we build our programs. Commitment, theological grounding, basic knowledge of legacy giving. As I said before, it's not necessary for you to be a lawyer to be on a plan giving committee. You need to be able to articulate those things we just talked about. But it is, we need to put it, and our leaders need to put it in a theological context. It's not just another charity that you're giving money to. We talk about competition, but I believe that if we make the case theologically and in a compelling way, the church will win every time. Because we have, maybe not the answer, but we have something precious, and we have the key to transformation. The other thing I want to say about the leadership is there are a couple of things that I've experienced as being primary reasons for the failure of plan giving programs. And the first is that it's disconnected to everything else that's going on in the church. You have some people, you have 2 or 3 people who have a passion about it. When they retire or get sick of it, it goes away because there's no connection to the rest of the church. There needs to be a commitment by the pastor. There needs to be a commitment by council. There needs to be a commitment by the stewardship committee to do this because, frankly, it takes time and a bit of bandwidth to make this successful. And if you don't have those commitments, I think it's not going to be as successful as it might be. So how much more? Do I have 5 more minutes to run through this? Okay. Some of the challenges that I think we face these days. Legacy is not what it used to be. You know, as much as we might want to do stained glass windows and plaques, people want to see their legacy live. And they want to see it live before they die. It used to be enough that, you know, I had plans to do this and that and the other. So what does that mean? We'll talk about that in just a second. The changing landscape for the church. Earlier today, we were talking about the fact that churches close. And so what does that mean if I'm asking you to leave your entire estate to this congregation? If there's a possibility that it won't be there. Is that good stewardship? What happens to it? Those sorts of things. So what that means is we have to rely less on the institutional form and more on the ministry that is happening. And we have to put policies in place where people have confidence that that ministry will continue even if the institutional form changes or goes away. And then articulating that compelling vision. So the responses you can see there: engagement and recognition strategies, emphasis on outcomes, transparency, a word we've heard quite a bit today, and that compelling case for support. These are some questions that I would ask you to take a look at as you begin to think about your own giving, and we're not going to go through them now. I think you were emailed these presentations, but they're from a book called, I can't remember what it's called, but it's by the guy who used to do planned giving for Harvard University, which I know you out west have limited respect for, but that's okay. And you know, we've massaged them a little bit to make them a little bit more faith-oriented, but these are the sorts of questions that I believe the folks in your congregation are asking themselves, or might ask themselves with a little bit of encouragement that might lead them to invest in the future of ministry. Wealth and Families is the name of the book. Andy mentioned not your parents' offering plate. The IRS website is, believe it or not, a pretty good plan giving resource if you have technical questions about the vehicles and the taxation of them. The Plan Giving Design Center, and then of course United Church Funds. Howard. Thank you.
I mean, I'm glad you mentioned the social responsibility, environmental, social governance aspect of United Church Funds earlier, because it's such a given, sometimes I neglect to mention it. But it goes to your point about what we invest in, what we don't invest in. I think it's even a larger question of what we do. So from that standpoint, socially responsible investing is a part of who we are and what we do. It is integrated into our very existence with our funds. So by that I mean there's a three-legged stool. So there's screens, certain stocks we want to buy, such as tobacco stocks, such as stocks that have to do with militarism or the privatization of prisons, things of that nature. There's the aspect of corporate resolutions and working with other organizations, be they religious or sectarian, in terms of trying to bring about change in the marketplace. And then just making shareholders aware of what the issues are from a corporate standpoint. So it's not only about the screening, but it's about all the other work we do. And all this work we do reflects the values of the United Church of Christ. So from a client standpoint, be it a church investing with us, or from a planned giving standpoint of an individual investing with us, they know their money is working not only to provide income for their mission or for a stream of income for an individual, but that money is working double time in the marketplace to bring about effective change that benefits society as a whole. So it's a win-win situation. The current screens are, as I mentioned, militarism, privatization. You may remember from the General Senate resolution of 2013, there was a call for a fossil fuels-free fund. We came up with that in November of 2014, excluding stocks such as coal, tar sands, things of that nature. So really putting the mission of the United Church of Christ in practice on a practical matter in the marketplace. There were a few words I heard today that Andy, Susan, Don, and I'm sure Matt are going to allude to later as well, that I just wanted to reference and circle back to before I start talking about the microsite for planned giving. Stories / testimonials, competition. Everyone is asking a member of your church or someone in the community who benefits from your church for a planned gift, be it their college, the local museum, the hospital, um, whomever, ASPCA. Everyone is asking continually and digitally. Awareness, what is your mission? Pastor involvement and accountability. So think about those phrases I just mentioned. And when we were thinking about planned giving, we were trying to envision a world where how could we help churches and missions of the UCC either implement or enhance an existing planned giving program that can meet people where they are. And in working with Don Hill, we knew that we had to provide some people with literature because some people like tangible items, but we also had to provide a format where people could obtain this information when it was most convenient for them. And by being most convenient, I mean on their laptop, on their telephone, on their tablet, or at work on the computer. So we came up with the microsite. Now the microsite is a tool in the toolkit for planned giving. It is not the solution, but it can be part of the solution. So what we're doing is we're offering this microsite to churches. Right now we're offering it free of charge. And for those of you who are in Zoom land, if you would go to, just for future reference, ucfunds.org, and if you were to click on the planned giving tab at the top of the screen, and then you would click on church ministry, you will see a video, and beneath that video, in the upper right-hand corner, the first line of the first paragraph, you'll see the 2 words, click here. And don't worry, don't write this down because it's not going to be a test. And if you go to our plan website, it's going to be easy. And if you don't, contact Don. Just kidding, just kidding. But this is what I'm about to share about the microsite is on our website. So what we wanted to do was, one of the things we had to do was, and this was important to me because when I joined United Church Funds, almost to a person, the first thing everyone said to me is, welcome aboard, Howard. And by the way, there are 5,000 churches and no 2 churches are alike. So how could we develop a template that all of these churches could use potentially for their planned giving program, but at the same time not have to recreate the wheel for 5,000 churches? So we came up with something called the microsite. And we wanted to make it look professional because this is what you're going to be asking your congregants to possibly consider for a planned gift. So it had to look good. We wanted it to be easy. We wanted it to be responsive, looks good, seamlessly on desktop, tablets, and phones. We wanted it to be turnkey, and we wanted it to look professional. So when you scroll down on our website, or in this case, up, Don, you'll see 4 basic themes that we came up with. Minimal, colorful, classic, and corporate. Just so happens most people choose the colorful theme, and those colors are actually the colors for Back Bay Mission, Mississippi, which was our first client. And if you click on view, it'll take you to a sample of what that site looks like. So if we blow this up a little bit, yeah, I know you're with me. All right. we're just not good people. I think it's still there. There you go. All right. So what we wanted to do was prevent something that was easy to navigate, was engaging, and give them to allow people to provide them with the information that they needed when they were comfortable to take a look at it. And the one thing we didn't want to do was inundate people with too much information at any given point in time. The whole point of the microsite is to start the conversation, to engage that congregant or perhaps a member of the larger community of the church, which everyone had talked about earlier, to seek you out to talk about making a planned gift. So up here in the corner where it says United Church of Christ, that's where the logo of your church or your mission would be listed. You'll see here at the tabs, we have what is planned giving, why give, testimonials, let's talk, and contact. Those are the headings, but this site is linear. There are no other pages. Everything is up and down here. You'll see some pictures that we have in the background here. This is from a library of pictures that we offer. But if your church or mission has pictures that they feel might be more conducive or better represent what you do and who you are, you can provide us with those pictures. We'll provide you with the requirements and specifications, and we could load those up for you. When you come down a little bit right here, this goes back to what Don talked about earlier. So what is planned giving? You know, tell me what it means. I have no clue what it is. This is a brief summary. This is text that we provide, but if you'd like to change this text or add or remove or maybe change or tweak something, you can provide that there. We scroll down a little bit more, and we talk about why give. Now, this site is for Plymouth Congregational Bob Hoyle's church in Fort Collins, Colorado. Now, you know, we talk about testimonials, but we also talk about how can a representative of the church, be it someone from the Planned Giving Committee or the pastor, reach out to people to talk about accountability, to talk about purpose, to talk about objective, to talk about why this is going to be important 10, 20, 30 years from now. We provide a video, and we suggested the video be about 2 minutes long. My man, Pastor Hal, 2 minutes 36, but it's all good because he's very good at it. But, you know, we could play now, you can play later at your own leisure, but it gives the pastor a chance to explain to people why this is so important, how your money is going to be used, and realizing that all of us here today at our respective churches, if they have an endowment, we're standing on the shoulders of those people who had the vision 10, 20, 30, maybe 50 years ago to start that endowment.